Start out this morning with just a little bit of gratitude. I feel incredibly fortunate to work for this organization. And that really starts with our ownership group, with Mel Raines.
The world watches the Caitlin Clark spectacle. Sold-out arenas from Indianapolis to hostile turf. Record-shattering TV ratings making executives scramble to rewrite their deals. And a league reborn from the ashes just 2 years after everyone wrote it off. Merch flies faster than sneakers at a clearance sale. Social media numbers? Obliterating every forecast. Little girls flood arenas in number 22 jerseys, eyes gleaming with dreams of becoming the next legend. But behind Indiana's glossy press releases and picture-perfect interviews, the shine is cracking. There's tension brewing between the Fever's fiery general manager and a front office suddenly drunk on success. A clash so volatile it could torch everything this franchise has worked for. And at the center of it all sits their rookie superstar, unaware that a rival 1,000 miles away may have sparked this chaos. A player whose name now echoes as a battle cry in the most unpredictable way, from the second Caitlin Clark's name echoed across draft night. The expectations on her shoulders crushed anything the WNBA had ever seen. This wasn't your cozy rookie journey. No gentle learning curve, no margin for human mistakes. Caitlin Clark didn't walk into the league. She was coronated. Before her first dribble, she was branded the savior of a franchise drowning in mediocrity. The Indiana Fever weren't just rebuilding, they were betting their entire resurrection on her. For years, the Indiana Fever were lost at sea. No identity, empty seats, and the painful sight of rival teams turning into dynasties while they sank deeper into irrelevance. Then came Caitlin Clark, the Iowa phenomenon who had college basketball eating out of her hand. The sniper who launched missiles from the logo with defenders hanging like ornaments. The magician whose passes bent reality itself. She wasn't just a player, she was a walking headline, and everybody knew it. But her arrival wasn't just salvation for Indianapolis, it was survival for the WNBA. TV networks needed her to keep the lights on. Sponsors needed her to prove their money was well spent. The league itself needed her to finally crash the mainstream, the way even legends before her never quite could. She wasn't just told to revive a franchise, she was commanded to rescue an entire league. Every night became a referendum, every stat line a judgment. Wins weren't just wins, they were proof of worth. When Clark took the court, the planet tuned in. When she missed, critics sharpened their knives. When she shined, the applause came with a side of suspicion, that unspoken challenge hanging in the air. Sure, but what have you done for us lately? That kind of pressure doesn't clock out after 40 minutes. It leaks into every hallway, infects every meeting, twisting expectations until reality doesn't stand a chance. Relationships crumble, patience evaporates, and soon the whole operation starts to rot from the inside. The first visible crack appeared in the form of Lynn Dunn, the general manager tasked with sculpting a dynasty around this once-in-a-generation prodigy. A battle-hardened veteran of women's basketball, Dunn knew something the spreadsheet suits upstairs couldn't comprehend. Talent isn't enough. She'd seen it all before. Superstars destroyed by wear and tear, teams too naive to protect their golden ticket, organizations obsessed with optics over outcomes. As the season wore on, Dunn's concern turned into quiet fury. She watched Caitlin Clark get pummeled game after game. Elbows, blindsides, cheap shots that somehow never drew a whistle. She saw physical play mutate into something meaner, almost personal. It wasn't just defense, it was deterrence. It was intimidation. It was an open invitation to break her spirit. The breaking point arrived during a punishing stretch where Clark became a target on repeat. Opponents weren't just guarding her, they were sending a message loud and clear. We don't care about your stardom, your numbers, or your ESPN highlight reels. On this court, you bleed like the rest of us. You'll have to earn your respect the hard way. That was the message echoing across the league. And that's when Lynn Dunn finally snapped. In post-game interviews and across social media, she stopped playing nice. She blasted the officiating, condemned the cheap shots aimed at her franchise star, and demanded the league step up before someone got seriously hurt. Her tone was crystal clear. Enough is enough. To outsiders, it looked like a veteran GM standing tall for her player. But behind closed doors, insiders whispered that this was the first public crack in the Indiana Fever's foundation. Dunn wanted a war. She wanted to rattle cages, to prove to Caitlin Clark and every woman in that locker room that leadership would fight for them. But the front office? Terrified. They saw headlines, not heroics. They feared the image hit, the perception of whining, the risk of staining the Cinderella story Clark's arrival had built. And when Dunn's anger found no outlet outside, it started turning inward. That's when Sophie Cunningham entered the chat, the Phoenix Mercury guard built like a storm in sneakers. 6'1" of pure grit, defensive fury, and zero tolerance for intimidation, Sophie didn't just talk toughness, she lived it. She's defended hard fouls, embraced chaos, and proudly stood for an older, rougher code of basketball. In short, she was something the modern WNBA had almost forgotten, a true enforcer. Sophie Cunningham plays with that old-school, no-apologies toughness straight out of a vintage highlight reel. When her teammates get hit, she hits back, sometimes with more force than finesse. When rivals take shots at her stars, she makes sure they regret it. She sets screens that rattle bones, spits trash talk sharp enough to draw blood, and racks up technicals in the name of loyalty. She's the walking embodiment of a warning. Touch one of ours, and you deal with all of us. As opponents kept hammering Caitlin Clark without fear of payback, Cunningham's brand of basketball became a painful reflection of everything the Indiana Fever lacked. Each time Clark hit the floor and her teammates stayed silent, every time a cheap foul went unanswered, the comparison screamed louder. Sophie was everything they were missing: the enforcer, the shield, the tone setter who could have flipped their entire identity. But that wasn't the full picture, and Lynn Dunn knew it. This wasn't just about signing one warrior. It was about confronting a much deeper truth buried inside the franchise. This was bigger than one roster move. It was a full-blown culture shift, a demand to rebuild the Indiana Fever from the inside out. And that's where the real war began. The alleged eruption took place far from cameras and microphones, inside a closed-door meeting that insiders say could redefine the franchise's entire future. According to multiple sources, Lynn Dunn finally lost it during what was supposed to be a calm, routine strategy session with the front office suits. On paper, it was a talk about performance, roster tweaks, and long-term plans. In reality, Dunn came loaded for battle. She arrived armed with receipts, game film, medical reports, and hard data detailing the punishment Caitlin Clark had been absorbing all season. She'd charted the fouls that went uncalled, the hits that never drew whistles, the silence from teammates that spoke volumes. At first, Dunn presented her evidence with calm precision, but that composure cracked fast. The executives countered with corporate talk, PR optics, media relations, keeping sponsors happy, protecting the positive image. They wanted to play nice, stay diplomatic, and let the system handle it quietly. The execs kept dodging with polished buzzwords: brand integrity, stakeholder alignment, strategic messaging. That's when Lynn Dunn snapped. Witnesses say she slammed her fists on the table so hard it made the coffee jump and the room freeze. Her voice, shaking with fury and exhaustion, cut through the corporate nonsense like a blade. She demanded answers, not about branding or optics, but about survival. What was the actual plan to protect their once-in-a-generation star? Not the PR spin, not the marketing fluff. The real on-court strategy to make sure Caitlin Clark could play fearless basketball without fearing the next cheap shot. In that raw, explosive moment, Dunn dropped a name that shifted the tone instantly: Sophie Cunningham. But here's the twist. She wasn't pitching a trade or a signing spree, though that thought might have been simmering. She was invoking Cunningham as a symbol, a warning, and a challenge to everyone in the room. Lynn Dunn wasn't just name-dropping Sophie Cunningham. She was using her as a blueprint for an attitude overhaul. "Why can't we be like that?" she reportedly barked, pointing to a clip of Cunningham going to war for a teammate. "Why can't we show that kind of backbone?" That loyalty? Why are we letting our star get hammered while we grin for cameras and pray for good PR? Dunn was done with pretending. She was sick of the Indiana fever being labeled soft, of executives caring more about jersey sales than bruises on Caitlin Clark's body. To her, every day of inaction was another day risking everything they'd worked for. The meeting imploded. No compromises, no handshakes, just wreckage. And when the smoke cleared, one truth stood naked in the room. The fracture was real. What had started as quiet tension had now erupted into open rebellion. At the core of this organizational civil war was a question bigger than basketball. What exactly was Caitlin Clark's purpose? Just a player? A brand? Or the future of the sport itself? It was a standoff between the old code of toughness and the new gospel of image. And here it is, the clash of eras, tradition versus modernity.